Hey guys, I'm Cameron. I'm a marriage therapist, and this is my channel, Modern Marriage. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about the quite contentious debate around body count and using that as a metric in the dating world, particularly when you're dating to eventually get married. So there are obviously two main sides to this debate. The first one being people who believe that body count is indicative of your character, of your values, of your views around sex and marriage and family life, and that makes body count a good metric to use when you're trying to find someone who aligns with your values, at least surrounding this issue of sex outside of marriage. And as a result, for people on this side of the debate, it's a good metric to use to judge your compatibility with someone as well as their future behavior. So at its best, this side of the debate really tries to emphasize the sacredness of sex. And by sacred, I mean a quality within sex and physical intimacy that demands not only our respect, but also our protection, that there's something about being intimate with somebody that matters, that it's more than just a decision of what you do with your body that has no impact on the rest of your life. It is saying that how we use our bodies and what we do with our bodies does have an impact on not just who we are, but on the people around us and on our life more generally. At its worst, unfortunately, this side of the debate tends towards a lack of forgiveness and a temptation towards believing that if we ourselves haven't made the same mistakes as other people, that not only do we not have to forgive them, but we also are somehow better than them just because our flaws are different than theirs. Now, on the other side of the debate are people who believe that body count should not matter to men or women when they're looking for someone to date and marry. So at its best, this view is about withholding a judgment about who someone really is until you take the time to get to know them. So trying basically not to judge a book by its cover, or even more, trying not to judge somebody on their past behavior. In addition to an embrace of enough humility to admit that even if the mistakes I've made or the decisions I've made in the past are different from what other people have done, that doesn't make me any better or worse than that other person. It just makes me different, but still equal. But at its worst, this view abdicates responsibility and basically says that whatever we do with our body does not have an impact on our mind or our character or who we are as a human being. If you're religious, it's the idea that what you do with your body doesn't impact your soul, and really succumbs to the idea of moral relativism, which basically means that everyone is equally virtuous, equally moral, no matter what it is they do with their body and no matter what it is they do behind closed doors. However, both sides of the debate are missing four really important things that are actually the reason that this debate matters at all when it comes to marriage and relationships. But what both of these sides are really missing in this discussion around body count are four things that I want to touch on in this video, as well as solutions for these issues. And the first one is that quantifying people based on their past sexual partners is really indicative of someone's unwillingness to forgive, someone's unwillingness to be humble enough to admit that we're all flawed, but we can all grow and develop and change in the present and in the future. And it ends up being a poor reflection on the people who hold this really high standard of having a pristine sexual history than it does a reflection on the people who maybe have a higher body count than some people would want. And the reason for that is that being a forgiving, understanding person is arguably just as important for any marriage as being somebody who's capable of and willing to be sexually loyal. Ultimately, there are many things that matter for marriage, and a really good sign that two people are moving towards a relationship that could last a lifetime is if, yes, they are loyal to each other, but also they're willing to forgive each other when they make mistakes, and they're willing to move on from things, particularly when they happened in the past before they even met each other. The second thing is, though, with that first point being said, that our society does really need an attitude adjustment about sex. And I think Gen Z in particular is starting to see this, as evidenced by recent polls showing that less than a third of the number of Gen Z are interested in one-night stands and casual hookups as millennials were at the same age. Young people are really starting to embrace the idea that sex is not meant to be treated casually. It is something that matters, and really that consent, mutual consent, is not enough to make any type of sex good or beneficial for both people. And the reason for that is that if you were just leaving it up to the consent of the two people present in that moment, you're totally leaving out your future self in the decision. And by that, I mean, if you're only paying attention to what you want or think is right in the moment, then you're not looking forward enough to know if you're going to one day be glad that you made that choice or if you're going to regret it. And ultimately, it seems like the best decisions we can make are those decisions that in the moment do seem like the right thing to do, but they also still seem like the right thing to do when we are in the future looking back on this moment and saying, yeah, I'm really glad I made that choice, as opposed to having any regret looking backwards. So the more we can invite our future selves into the conversation about who we should be sleeping with and when, the more we're going to be cultivating a life in and outside of the bedroom that one day we're going to be happy that we led and that we feel like is getting us closer to a version of ourselves that we want to be. The third important part about this debate is that it tends to skew in the direction of men criticizing women for having a higher body count than they would want if they were going to date that woman. And the reason this is important is because women typically have, on average anyway, a greater opportunity to sleep with more people casually than men do. And that's only because men are willing to engage in casual sex more than women. I think anyone that you've ever met would be willing to admit that, at least on average, that men are more likely to agree to sleep with a woman in a one-night stand or have some sort of physical intimacy that's not linked to connection than most women are. So the issue here often boils down to opportunity. Is someone who doesn't have the opportunity to sleep with multiple people more virtuous just because they've had less sexual partners than someone who's had a lot of opportunity and so has thus capitalized on that opportunity and slept with more people? Or is it more that you need to have opportunity to prove virtue? You need to have the chance to choose the wrong thing, but still choose the right thing to prove that you actually have the morals and values that you think you have. So before we judge other people for how many sexual partners they've had or really anything they've done, we have to think about whether if we were in that position with that level of opportunity, would we not have done the same thing? And the fourth really important point here is that body count is being used as a metric for finding values alignment, for finding someone who views sex the same way as you do, who values physical intimacy in the same ways, and believes the same things about the role that intimacy plays in a relationship, in a marriage that is committed. And while it's really good to date for values alignment, that's actually the only proper way to date when it comes to marriage is to find somebody who aligns with your values. Body count might not be the best metric because it assumes that our values and our character can be 100% assumed based on our past behavior. When in reality, we all mess up. We all do things that don't align with our values, and we all make choices that later we look back on and think, that wasn't great, even if by the time we're looking back and by the time we're dating more seriously, we are a different person. People change a ton, especially in their 20s. So somebody who has a lot of sexual partners in their early 20s, if they're dating in their mid to late 20s and they're trying to get serious about dating and about relationships and marriage, they could be a very different person than who their sexual history would indicate that they are. So what's the solution here? So I think it's 3 parts. The first part being to avoid heuristics or these metrics and shortcuts for dating that basically help you filter out people. A lot of us are using body count as a heuristic to filter out people who we think don't align with our sexual values, when in reality, the best way to date is actually to get to know each individual person on an individual basis so that we can figure out who they really are instead of judging them based solely on one fact about their history. This used to be a lot easier to do, especially in previous generations when things like church attendance were higher and it was more acceptable to date at work. And the reason for that is that we would use the location that we were in to filter based on values alignment instead of having to use metrics and heuristics like body count. So when people went to church more regularly, they would usually meet at church, and they knew that at least they had a shared worldview to some degree and a shared set of values that accompany that worldview because they both go to church. Or if you're meeting at work, you're both obviously interested to some degree in a professional lifestyle. You probably believe to some degree in the values of the organization that you work for. And being around these same people day after day gives you a chance to naturally get to know each other so that first impressions or quick judgments about things like body count don't play such a big role in the opinion you develop about each other. So instead of using these heuristics to whittle down your dating prospects, Instead, look for places that you can be where you can find people who align with your values. So if you believe in God, find a religious community to join. If you're passionate about some cause or movement, try to join an organization that is promoting change and solutions towards that cause. And if you have a hobby, you can do something as simple as translating a hobby that you do on your own to something that you do in a group. Personally, I've really found Facebook and Meetup to be two super useful platforms that help people connect over shared interests. And on this point, it's really important for all of us when we're going through our dating lives to flesh out what exactly it is that we believe. What's our worldview? What do we think a good life looks like? And what do we think it means to be a good person? Because it's hard to find someone who aligns with our values if we don't already know what our values are. And the second solution, I believe, to this issue on the body count debate is to treat sex more seriously for all of us. And starting on an individual basis that hopefully translates to society really embracing the seriousness of sex again, that it is the only natural method to creating another human life. And that's a huge deal, let alone the ability for sex to bond two people together in a very emotionally, psychologically holistic way. And the third solution is to be slow to judge and quick to forgive. So I imagine all of us one day are going to want our spouse to be able to forgive us for our own shortcomings. But it's really difficult to expect to receive something that we aren't first willing to give ourselves. And so if we aren't willing to forgive other people for a lifestyle or a past that we don't approve of, then how can we one day expect our spouse to be forgiving of all the things that we do wrong on a daily basis? Okay, guys, thanks for tuning in today. As always, please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this, and please leave a comment on this video if you have any thoughts on body count and dating and marriage. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. I'm Cameron, and this is Modern Marriage. See you guys next week.